Welcome to the Earth Your Wild podcast, brought to you by Reuserbox, providing a better way to buy cardboard boxes. We're your hosts, Jack and Ellie.
This is the podcast where we talk to industry experts and change makers to try to answer the question, how do we make our businesses better for people and the planet? So today we're chatting to Phil Sturgeon from the charity Protect Earth. Protect Earth are on a mission to plant as many trees as possible in the UK to help mitigate the climate crisis. They work with landowners, environmental and voluntary organisations and the general public to access land, plant trees and monitor their development. Welcome to the podcast, Phil. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you again. Last time I saw you were busy planting trees in a field.
Yeah.
Yes, we were. Yeah, thanks for that. That was good fun. We joined you down at was it Warwickshire? Is that right?
Yeah, Bobbin Hall.
Yeah, and it was during Storm Babette, I think, wasn't it? One of the wettest days of the year.
I've stopped paying attention to what the names are. We just continue planting through various named storms now, and it's just become part of the course. We're just like, this work needs to get done.
There has been a lot of rain lately, hasn't there? So
I think it's the wettest autumn in recorded history. I nearly said fall. I spent too much time in America, and if Americanisms pop out, I apologize. But autumn.
Speaking of America, so am I right in saying you started in the tech world in New York? Is that right? What's the story?
Yeah, I was working for a bunch of different startups, and then eventually WeWork, who you may have heard of. They got quite famous. Even if you weren't aware of what they were doing while they were a business, they've now gone bankrupt in quite a amazing story of, I don't know, just fireballing into the ground. But yeah, doing all sorts of tech work over there, and my background is kind of tech, and more recently I've been doing a lot of tech, like helping people reduce the carbon footprint of their software, as well as planting trees, because I'm all about trying to save the planet and using whatever means we can do to do that. Seems helpful.
I when I researched you, so you went from working in tech startups in New York to cycling around Europe, is that right? And planting trees.
Yeah.
How did that happen? What was going through your head?
There were a series of stepping stones that all made sense at the time. Basically, the visas that you get in America, there's a bunch of different types, but the type I was getting was tied to the job, and working for WeWork, while it was just horrendous, I was like, I hate this enough that I'm just out of here. I'm out of here. I don't care if I have to leave the country. I'm gone. Maybe I'll come back some other time. And I sold everything I owned apart from my bicycle, my backpack, and I just, took the cheapest flight I could to get out of the country, and ended up in like the Canary Islands and was cycling around there for a while. And then took the ferry to Europe, to Spain, and was cycling around there for a while. And I just kind of never really stopped. I was just kind of aiming for London, and then I went, actually, I'm gonna head east for a while, and ended up in Poland. And then thinking about going home, I was like, actually, I'm gonna head south for a while, and ended up in Croatia and Albania, and just all over the place.
So no plan then.
No plan. No, I was still working for a software company at the time, so I was trying to like cycle 100 miles and do a day's work. It was a bit much, but yeah, while I was cycling around, I kind of got a good amount of time to listen to more podcasts about more interesting topics about science and technology and the climate and current day news and just every topic you can imagine, and then kind of having that correlate with what I was seeing on the ground. Like I was seeing firsthand evidence of all the the mass deforestation, the forest fires, the floods, the droughts, the desertification of whole areas. There was an entire mountain range I saw which had been it's on the border of Poland and Slovakia, where Slovenia. I'm forgetting geography right now, but on the border of Poland, and an extreme storm had knocked down about half of their trees, and then like pine beetle had come through, and eaten a huge amount because the numbers had exploded, and that left more standing deadwood than usual. So forest fire came through and finished it off. So miles and miles and miles and miles of forest just gone. And so increasingly I was seeing more and more of these mad things happening. and thinking, I'd really like to do something about this. And for a while I was just kind of fundraising, here's, I've got a profile on this website, you can throw some trees into it and they'll go get planted somewhere. But after raising like 100,000 trees, I was like, I actually want to get involved with doing this myself. And that was the big change. Kind of come back to the UK, realizing that we're even more nature depleted than anywhere else. We've got the lowest forest cover of like 13%, depending on sources. And when we're really struggling to hit our targets to improve that, we're doing 20-50% per year of our targets. So I figured I'd get stuck in there and see what I could do.
So it's interesting that you're. So I'm right in saying you're just doing tree planting in the UK. Is that right?
We're only in the UK at the moment. I would love to get over to Portugal, Spain, and possibly the Netherlands for different reasons. But those countries closer to the equator, there is potentially more beneficial impact. Like you're doing de-desertification. The work is harder, but you're planting in land that used to be fertile and lush. And was just really badly managed and overplowed and has just turned into dust. So it's quite hard work, but bringing that ecosystem back has a lot more knock-on effects. But for now, we're focused on the UK because it's where I'm from. It's the system we know, and there's always a bit of a funny thing about like turning up in someone else's country and trying to fix it for them. There's enough people that the white savior stuff going on. People trying to do that in Africa, and I just don't want to get involved in that. I think everyone should be empowered to help fix their countries. So we're looking for people on the ground in Portugal and Spain who want to do that work, and we will work with them as opposed to showing up and telling them what to do.
I actually went got a camper van on holiday and we drove across Portugal, and we were actually driving through some area, and then the road had just like melted, and then there'd been I guess like forest fires, and it was all just gone. Just like piles of ash, and we saw like a ranger tower, and we climbed all the way to the top of this ranger tower, and like as far as we could see, just this whole area of forest was just gone. We were actually planning on driving to the forest, and we were like, "Where's this forest then?" And then we realised it was gone. So...
Yeah. It sounds really depressing, but that's kind of what I was struggling with on the bike tour. Was I was going through every country, and I was trying to stay as far away from people as possible. I was wild camping. I was like learning to forage. I was filtering water. So I was trying to really get out in the nothing. And there's a lot less nothing than you think there is. I mean, yes, obviously this is Europe. It's quite densely populated, but still, it was really hard. Like I'd go to the areas on the map that were the greenest, and it was just all cut down for dairy cows. Like chunks of the Black Forest just weren't forest at all. And every time you think you get into the middle of nowhere, all you can hear is planes from the airport that's actually just around the corner. And it was really hard to get away from people and things. Everything was just built on, and the things that were far away were just, the forests were completely replaced with timber production, and they were, being clear cut, and there was barely any wildlife. So it was just a bit eye-opening to kind of go, right, let's go find all the pretty stuff then, and then just not find it. So yeah, we're working on trying to bring some of those spaces back in the UK, and kind of helping link up some of the little scraps of woodland to make bigger woodlands, bigger ecosystems where there can be more wildlife, and it'll be a lot nicer to go stroll about, but it's also sucking up CO2 and good for wildlife as well. So trying to do positive things after seeing that bleakness.
Yeah. So how did you turn that into Protect Earth? How did you turn that kind of idea you had into an actual charity that's doing all this great stuff?
Yeah, that was also pretty random. I'd been cycling around. I got as far down as Morocco and was like cycling back from that when COVID stuff was kind of happening. And I just got back to the UK and got myself into an Airbnb that turned out to be on this amazing farm, 460 acres, 60 acres of ancient woodland. And I was like, I'm just going to stay here for a week. And then they said, you can't leave your house. The government was like, you have to stay in your house. And I didn't have one. And I was like, what the hell? So the farm was just like, you can stay here for a couple of months until we're allowed to Airbnb this again. You might as well stay here. And they were really cool. And I got to hang out on the farm and learn a lot. And that kind of increased. There's this weird feeling about having a connection with nature that I feel like a lot of people don't have, even if they like to go for hikes in nature. Something I didn't have until then was like seeing this piece of land over time and seeing it change through the seasons, and seeing plants, you know, in their nascent form, and then kind of popping up and growing, and just seeing that difference every day over months really kind of changed my brain. And that was when I started thinking, like, I really want to get more involved in this, not just find ways to support some charity, but I want to like get land and make it better. And you can't just, you know, land's quite expensive. So at first we were like, who can we work with that wants to do this? And I talked the farm into planting a bunch of trees. They said they'd thought about planting, but it was so incredibly complicated. Like, you've got to find someone who costs £250 an hour to go and do the research to figure out which form to fill out to find out if maybe you'll get the grant. That you know, it's really complicated. And even then, you've got to like get permission from every single surrounding person and all your neighbors, and ask the sheep over the road what they think, and get the local parish council to sign off. It's such a faff that a lot of people just don't want to do it, even though they're not using that slopey bit of their farm that they can't get a tractor over, or that corner at the end that's near a woodland, but they can't harvest in there, so it just doesn't get used. Or something that's a little bit too boggy that could be a wet woodland. There's lots of this land out there that's just small scrips and scraps that is a little bit too small for the government grants to bother with, but is still valid and should be an ecosystem. And so I kind of offered to help them do it, and I was like, let's get this done. How hard could it be? I was like, oh God. And once we'd got that done, we partnered up with Ecology. And they were really helpful because they wanted to start planting trees in the UK. And I already was friends with them because I'd been fundraising for them while I was traveling around. And yeah, they kind of said, well, we'll chuck the money at you. If you want to set up a charity, we'll chuck the money at you. You go and plant those trees on that farm. And then if any other farmers come forward saying they want to do it, we'll send them your way. And so between Ecology kind of giving us a really good leg up early on, and then me just managing to find loads more other farmers. Sometimes I'm just handing out business cards in the pub, but it works. And we've managed to now go from kind of being this weird scrappy thing where it's just me and a couple of mates, like not quite knowing what to do, to, yeah, we're on 60 different sites. We've got 75 saplings in the ground. We've got 3 pieces of land that we own. So in 3 years, we've managed to scale that quite rapidly from where we started.
Cool. Do you think the kind of solution to that kind of eco anxiety, because I know I get a lot of eco anxiety, do you think the solution is action then? Because you've obviously, that's what you've chosen to do, isn't it?
I think you're, absolutely. It sounds like you're just one of those people that just does stuff, you know.
Yes, I do like to just get on with it. Well, yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of different angles to campaigning. There's a lot of different things that need to be done. There's amazing campaigners out there who are, that often people will say, like, you're not getting your hands dirty, you're not getting that much work done, but they'll be the ones that are trying to affect change at the government policy level by increasing the grants available, or changing the grants, or doing something with policy that means that infinitely more can be done, right? Because if the government suddenly said, well, you know, we're going to double all the money for not just tree planting, but for any environmental improvements, if we're just going to double it, then obviously everyone would run out and go do it. That's potentially a silly example, but it kind of illustrates the point of the amount of time they spent working on policy. Like, how many trees would they have planted in the field if they'd have come to hang out with me, and which is more valid? So there's a lot of different approaches to trying to fix this whole mess. But specifically because the UK is only doing like 50% of its tree planting goals, and a lot of that average is being carried by Scotland doing like 80% of theirs. We're closer to 20%. We really just need to do it either way, whether it's the best thing to do, useful thing to do. It needs to be done regardless. And with the main problem being government inertia, our approach of just getting on with it helps a lot, because there's so many farmers that are like, I've tried to do this 5 different ways and it didn't work. How does it work with you guys? And I'm like, point us at a field and we'll turn up with the trees and the spades and the ecologist and everything you need. You don't have to do anything. We'll just come do it for you. And I think that's helping the little guy, even if it's not solving the whole problem.
I think it's interesting that you seem to have come up with this angle of getting all these little pockets of land that aren't really very useful and nobody really has a use for. I think I've not heard of anybody else doing it that way. I think that's
it's partly because I'm sure you've heard about all the kind of the tropes in the media about like rewilders versus farmers and how we're all screaming at each other, and we're really not. It's basically rewilding and agroforestry is pretty much the same thing. It's all about, 76% of our land is agricultural currently, and we need to increase tree cover on that. We need to make some bits wetter and boggier, and some bits have beavers in, and there's a million different things to do. But it's all about increasing. Our approach is usually how can we help improve wildlife cover without really impacting food output? Because if we go and plant up too much of our good quality farming land, we're just going to import more Amazon deforested stuff. So that's not very helpful. There are charities out there that will try and buy up working farms and stick trees all over it. That's not what we do. Even the land that we've bought was sold to us by sheep farmers who said, this is really bad grazing. We don't really want it. Do you want it? Yeah, sure. We'll turn that into a woodland. That's great. So we're trying not to mess with food production, and we can actually increase food production on land where we plant. So as well as doing the awkward corners and bits and slopes, we actually do a lot of shelter belt planting. If you think about a hedgerow, that's amazing at sequestering carbon. It's actually sequestering twice as much carbon per square meter as a woodland, because they're so dense and they grow through each other, well managed and not just flailed to death. They're amazing. But we make thicker, taller hedgerows called shelter belts that are like one row of hedgerow, a row of trees, another row of trees, another row of hedgerow. And this will help force air to go up and over, which means that in the field, if you've got crops, they're not getting as much wind damage. Your soil isn't getting as much erosion. Your livestock aren't getting blown around, so they're not shivering as much. So you don't have to spend as much money on feeding them, which that food has emissions and land use and everything else. So by working intelligently with farmers, we can make more food happen with lower emissions whilst sequestering emissions and providing habitat for wildlife. So working together is really the key thing. And I just got really bored of seeing kind of people arguing with each other and figured, like, what's the third way we can do together?
Well, it's smart. I think it's smart because I guess that's little slices of land that they don't have a use for, and I suppose you're not only doing something good, but you're giving them some value to their farming operation. So
for sure, with the shelter belt specifically, you're losing 5 to 10 meters of grass grazing, but most of the species that we're planting, sheep and cows will actually nibble on the buds, so they'll keep that hedgerow trimmed for you. And a lot of them are dropping, fruit and nut throughout the year. So you're actually reducing how much food you need to buy there as well. So it's providing food, it's providing shelter. Same with shade trees. We plant those in cattle-proof guards, just dot one here, there, and everywhere. They're a bit expensive, but we do a few in a field. And then the cows and sheep have protection from the rain and the wind and the sun, and they get more food. So there's a lot of ways to work together.
I think it's amazing that you're building these great relationships with the farming community, because I almost feel like there is that negativity between environmentalists and the farming community sometimes, and they don't always even me, like I've grown up in the countryside, and I find myself getting quite angry at farmers sometimes because I see. I mean, I don't know the background, but we all know that our topsoil is getting eroded away, isn't it? And when we have bad weather, you can see that the fields get flooded, and it just, from the outside, I kind of end up thinking, what are the farmers doing? They just look like they're burning a pile of rubbish in their field. They're doing this, and it's really easy to kind of look from the outside and be quite judgmental. So
absolutely. And I used to share a lot of those thoughts as well. Like, I didn't grow up as a farmer. I've got a bit of a West Country accent, and soon I will be buying a tractor, so I've completed that journey. But I've grown up near farms, but not in the farming community, and spending a lot more time. Like, now I spend most of my time hanging out with different farmers on different farms, and I hear all about their problems and why things are the way they are. And there's a diversity of opinions. But the fundamental thing is that that saying they're doing what they're told isn't quite accurate. Like, there are certain decisions that are out of their hands that have been made for years and years. Like, in the 60s, there's kind of this move to mechanization, and they're kind of being told to get rid of more of their hedgerows so they can start producing more food. There's been all these silly things like like the way that the payments work is by, what's it called? Basic payment scheme is you're paid per hectare of farmable land. Even if you're not really planning on doing much with it, you still get a chunk of money every year for having that land stay farmable. And so if you had a field that you weren't using and it started to, naturally regenerate into scrub, and there was gorse and bramble, and it was in its early stages of turning back into a woodland all by itself, you would have to get in there with a topper and mow all that down to make sure that you get your payments. You'd probably ask a mate who needed some extra sheep grazing to come on in, not even really charge them any money, just so they would eat that all down and you'd get more cash. And things like the hedgerows, like for a while, if you let your hedgerows grow too tall, you'd get fined. So you're in there with a flail every single year, just mangling that hedgerow. And so a lot of the things we look at and just kind of say, that's bad, why are you doing it? They had to. That was the only choice to stay afloat. And things like massive piles of manure is bad, but we could get more biodigesters out onto farms, and we could be capturing that methane and selling it to the national grid, national gas. Some people are doing that, but we need to be handing out huge subsidies to make that happen. And all sorts of other things like, direct drill is way better than plowing. It's brilliant. Those machines are incredibly expensive. How do already struggling farmers afford that? So they've already got so much on their plate, and they've got so much judgment and so much other stuff happening. That's kind of why they're so happy that they're like, oh, we've wanted to plant trees for ages. You do that for us. It won't cost us any money. If there is any income, the farmer's going to have it. We don't need it. But usually it's just free. They're like, thank God for that. Something was free. Because everything else that they're being like demanded to do is just completely unaffordable at the moment. And when they try and enter in for grants, like there's the higher tier stewardship, which is like, you'll do some of these good things instead of some of these bad things, and we'll pay you for it. Those grants exist, but 80% of people that apply for them are being rejected or ignored. So a lot of this is just purely governmental inertia and bureaucracy and confusion and inaction, not really their fault.
Yeah, that is really the problem, isn't it? Governments, which yeah.
What's the solution, Phil?
When government is the problem, a different government seems like it would be a good idea. But as a charity, I'm not meant to be too political.
No.
Yeah, honestly, having someone that cares would be really helpful. We've been messing around with elms, playing hokey cokey, and like, oh, is this going to be the? Oh no, maybe not that. Maybe we'll do this. Oh, maybe not that. And some of that indecision is a huge amount of the problem. Like in coming up to Brexit, nobody wanted to plant trees on their land because they were concerned that they were told that the grants were going to change. And then shortly afterwards, there were suggestions of elms, and so everyone was holding off, waiting to see what that would be like, and kind of just pick something and go with it. But this government has never stuck with anything. Like we were trying to go from 13% forest cover to like 17%. And they said, oh no, that's a bit hard. Let's actually just go to 16%. So the funding's fallen away. And we've got problems where we've got land that we've been waiting to plant for a year and a half. And the government's just saying, no, we don't really have all that much money right now. So, can't. And things like that are a huge problem, because if we're literally buying land with the intention of planting it and getting told no, then like how many other people that have some spare land that would be happy to plant it are also not getting that sorted out, and they're probably less motivated than we are, because we're like, this is our only job, and they're like, oh, I'll think about it, oh, whatever, that housing company is going to offer me some money, I'll just do that instead, right? So yeah, we need the government to kind of step up and start funding these funding these departments that are meant to be making this a priority and treating it a bit like a wartime effort, and not just tree planting. More money for natural regeneration, more money for peat bog restoration, more money for everything.
So if you're a landowner listening, or a farmer perhaps, and you're thinking, you might want to plant some trees, what's the best step forward then?
Don't go to the government.
Yeah.
Go to Phil.
How can you help?
Yeah. Yes, whatever stage of the process you're in, whether you've submitted stuff to the government and they've ignored you for 18 months, whether you've been trying to work with the Woodland Trust and that's not gone so great, whatever stage you're in, if you're struggling, or even if you're just kind of thinking about it and you've got a field you're not using all that much, get in touch. Just go to protect.earth, and you can go to /landowners, and that's a specific form that is just all about that. but you can go click on contact if you want to chat to us and ask some questions about it. And we've got a phone on there, which usually comes through to me, and we can talk all about your needs. But we want to do all sorts of stuff. We're doing more invasive species removal. I really enjoy getting rid of rhododendrons. They are a plague, and we've got 38,000 hectares of rhododendrons in this country to get rid of, and my electric chainsaw is hungry for more. But we can try and find ways to help with whatever nature-based things you want to do. As you know, we work on anything that is nature and climate at the same time. If it helps nature and sequesters carbon, we'll do it.
What are the benefits of so obviously we talked about tree planting to sequester carbon. What are the other things that you offer?
So yeah, we can try and help with natural restoration. That's a trickier one. That's the idea of kind of leaving a area of land alone to regenerate, and maybe introducing a few species that aren't turning up by themselves. But that involves a lot of like deer fencing, and that's quite expensive. So we try and go the government grants approach for that, but we'll battle that through for you. And that's just handy because it means you've got, native seeds popping up all by themselves, and you didn't have to waste money on like buying a bunch of tree guards and things like that. Yeah, there's a bunch of different things. Like if you have peat bog restoration, then that can be a really good carbon sink. It's all about blocking up the drainage ditches and kind of making the water stay in the land. And then all of the plants that are growing out of that kind of die and fall in there and make this really thick soil underwater. And that's just really good for carbon. You get money for doing that. Hedgerows, shelter belts, wildflower meadows, they all improve the quality of the soil, the quality of the carbon sequestration and habitat for animals. So all of those things we can help with.
And I guess they reduce things like flooding as well, don't they? All of these things. So
yeah, absolutely. Any tree
really.
planting, any water interruption you can do. If you've got big fields, just whacking a hedgerow down the middle will stop water from flowing, straight through that, which is going to reduce your, the amount of soil you're losing into the river and reduce the amount of silt in the river and everything else. So yeah, trying to keep water higher up the course is pretty important.
I never realized it was so strategic.
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of it kind of seems like just bunging trees in fields sometimes, but there's a lot more stuff going on than that.
Is it hard to kind of like protect the longevity or the life of, if you're planting trees or hedgerows, is it hard to try and make sure that they're still going to be here in 30 years or 50 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So we get landowners to sign a agreement. It's not like a deed or a contract. It's more of a letter of intent. But we get them to sign something saying that if they intentionally destroy the trees, they have to pay us, and we'll go and put them somewhere else. So if they let their sheep in after we've asked them please not to, sheep will absolutely destroy those trees. So they need to be fenced off, right? If they let them in, they have to pay to replant. But if they die naturally, we replant them. So some charities, some organizations work differently. They'll just kind of say, here are some trees, off you go, done. We check in every year at least, and we'll kind of do it's called a beat up survey for reasons I'm not quite sure. But we'll check on how those species are doing, and not just how many trees are alive, but which trees are doing well, which ones are failing, what can we do differently. Sometimes we'll go back and use more mulch mats to keep the competition down. We'll use mycorrhizal fungi root dip to give the roots a better chance to grow through winter. And so we'll make sure that those woodlands are actually creating, are actually existing. And once they get to a certain point, then there are certain restrictions that stop people from cutting them down anyway. You have to get permission to chop down a woodland, right? So yeah, that's kind of our approach. We help throughout establishment and into maturity.
And is it quite a high success rate? If you go and plant a load of trees, or do you get people don't make it?
80% is like what you're aiming for. That's the gold standard. 100% just means you'd have to go and like thin a few and cut some down, because you plant more than you expect to grow, knowing that some will die. It's called overstocking. So if 100% of them live, you've got to go and thin that out a little bit. But if 50% of them live or less, you might be running a bit low. So you go and pop some more in. And thankfully nature helps out. Sometimes a few little saplings have popped up in between the ones we've planted and given it a little boost. So yeah, really, it's not about the numbers of trees. It's more about is this area of woodland doing something useful? And the ecologist can let us know what needs to be done. Um, the worst site we've had two complete failures, both smaller, 500 trees each. One of them was an area there was a bunch of sheep and the fence went into the river, like dead end into the river. And it was an incredibly dry summer, right after we'd planted them. And the sheep just walked around the end of the fence and then ate all the trees. God damn it. And we've replanted all of those somewhere else. We've given up on that site. And that made us change our rules about, letting sheep in and fencing and things like that. So we're learning and adapting. The other one was, I think, just bad selection. It was before we had an ecologist on staff, and we just were kind of using contractors. And this person kind of said this area will be fine for planting trees, and 100% of them died. It was the really bad summer of 2022 or whatever it was, but yeah, 100% of them just baked in the sun. It was a south-facing slope, really quick draining soil. And I think we've just given up on that area, and we've planted around closer to the stream, and that will allow to eventually grow up maybe into that area, or maybe that area just likes being what it is. But the later ones all the ones I went to see were 95% plus by 2 years. So we're holding pretty well on most of them. Yeah.
So I guess it's really important to put the right trees in the right place.
Absolutely. Because people talk about the right tree in the right place, and that there's a lot more meaning to that than I realized. It's the soil type and the water levels and the gradient and the proximity to water and the direction it's facing and what else is around to protect it from extreme wind or anything else. And there's a lot that goes into it, and that's why I'm really glad we have a brilliant ecologist who wrote an article about, like, for our site. It was like the right tree in the right place at the right point in the climate crisis, because we've got to think about what would do well now, but also what's going to do well in a few years. So we plant a bunch of species that maybe can get to maturity now, but will their offspring be able to establish and get to maturity to replace them? Because trees don't last forever. So if we make a woodland out of all these things that won't be able to survive in 20, 30 years, that's not very helpful. So we have to think about the ongoing life cycle of the woodland as well.
So are you having to plant trees? Are you kind of assuming the climate is getting warmer in this country and you're planting trees that can cope with that?
Yes. So there's a whole bunch of data and a whole bunch of research done by folks smarter than me called Forest Research, which is part of the old Forestry Commission or Forestry England. And they basically kind of give you some recommendations on what trees should go there, and you use that with a pinch of salt and a bit of your own insight and what you've seen on the ground. But things like, there's not much point in planting ash, because if ash dieback, it's probably going to die anyway. And it's not quite as good at handling extreme drought summers, whereas things like hornbeam, they service the same sort of wildlife as the ash, but they're a lot more drought tolerant. So they're much happier if we plant those, and they'll cope. So we're kind of planting for the climate we expect, and it's happening all over the world. It's called like it's called migration. I think like tree migration is a thing. Certain species are moving north, and so I forget the exact species. I think it's something like beech wouldn't have been seen much in Scotland, but they're planting quite a lot more beech in Scotland now, because it's getting warmer up there, and it likes those temperatures where other species don't so much. And we're quite lucky that we have quite a tall country, because things can migrate north. But you think about Iceland, they can't plant any of their native trees anymore. They have to plant like genetically modified versions of some of their trees, because they can't cope with the climate that exists now. So yeah, we're lucky that some of our trees can just go a little bit further north instead of having to invent new trees. But at some point in the future, we might need to start planting trees from France and Spain that aren't native to this country, but help them migrate north a little bit.
So what will happen to all the trees, like the current species that are here? Are they?
Yeah, like ancient woodlands and things like.
Are they going to struggle in like 50 years? Do you think, or?
it's a real concern and not my area of expertise, but temperate rainforests specifically are quite lucky because they kind of produce their own moisture. So there's a certain amount of, if you can establish something that will create its own ecosystem, and kind of protect itself, then it should be okay. That's kind of why we focus on, we talk a lot about tree planting, and some people kind of want to talk more about natural regeneration, but that's a much slower process. And we're kind of thinking, build the structure with the tree planting, get the canopy up, get the shade in, and you can make tweaks and modifications over time. You can make little clearings, you can have other things pop up, and you can, regenerate bits underneath the canopy. But kind of establishing that canopy means that the increased temperatures aren't going to be affecting everything in there quite so badly. So yes, ancient woodlands will have some things to deal with, but if they're well established and there's a lot of cover and they've got the proper upper canopy and like the middle canopy and the lower ground cover, there's quite a lot of protection from the elements that things can start to grow in. But yeah, I don't think we're going to like lose the oak completely from temperature change, but we might start to see more species from elsewhere naturally appearing, or being introduced, recommended by foresters as things change. But that's still something I'm not entirely sure about. Like, we're still planting British trees, but at some point that might have to change.
How to maybe this is a dumb question, but how does like, so if you've got these like native species to like France and Europe, how do they naturally migrate to
birds?
The UK. Oh, okay.
So at some point,
picturing trees walking along or something.
yeah. So a lot of natural regeneration is done by birds, right? Like 90% of the oaks planted in this country are done by jays, and they don't go very far. But a lot of other species will go a lot further. There's all sorts of stuff that, again, not the expert on this, but people suggesting that the English oak isn't actually native to England. It's kind of from the continent and was brought over at some point, whether it's by birds or, Romans brought loads of other trees over. They're responsible for sweet chestnut and a couple of other things. So there's a whole bunch of interesting history of like where trees came from and how and why. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also so you rely a lot on volunteers, don't you, to help you get the work done, I guess.
Absolutely.
The trees planted. And companies as well can volunteer with you. So we've obviously done a couple of days, which was good fun.
Absolutely. You guys were great. Really quick workers.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, how can people get involved if they want to support you and get out there and plant some trees?
Yeah, head over to protect.earth. It's a bit of a funny domain name because it is .earth, and maybe your listeners are kind of more used to that, but some people like, and then what? But no, it is just protect.earth. And no.com, right. Just .earth. Yeah, there's page, if you folks want to donate, that's amazing. Help keep our staff employed so we can do more good things. There's a donate button. There's the volunteering page where you can volunteer as an individual. You can sign up, and we'll let you know when tree planting happens near you. We're trying to build a database of people that can, all over the country, because if we're doing something near London, we've got a lot of interest. If we're doing something near Abergavenny, less so. So we're really struggling in certain areas. And so we end up kind of, hiring paid tree planters, which is great. And we're happy to support them. But because we're often doing things on a bootstrap budget without the support of the government grants, volunteers really help. And then, the paid volunteers are even more helpful because we get like corporate groups, and they're like, like you've done, and they, there's team building going on. We usually try and get lunch sorted out, and you take a bunch of photographs. People usually flying their drones about. It's, can't promise good weather, but can promise good team building.
Yeah, no, I think it was
helpful.
Really good. Yeah, we really liked it, and I think, like you say, it's really great for like teamwork and stuff, team building. Yeah. But I think you mentioned earlier about like when you were on that farm in lockdown and like seeing nature, and I think during lockdown a lot of people started to appreciate nature more, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I think it just offers people that opportunity to get outside and do something positive, doesn't it? Perhaps if you just work in an office all day and you don't really see much of the outside, I think it's probably a great chance to like educate people as well, because I think a lot of people are still really disconnected from nature, aren't they? They don't really see the climate crisis as that relevant to them. Even if they know it's happening, it's still this very kind of abstract thing to a lot of people, I think.
Absolutely. Anyway. I mean, that's how I used to feel. I mean, it was why it's such a sudden change for me, like noticing the climate crisis when I was spending 95% of my time outdoors. Most people spend like 99% of their time indoors. And so like the climate crisis, when I was in New York, like the climate crisis was the vague thing that happened between me getting from my house to the subway and it being a bit warm. You get to the office and like the AC's on, you don't really think about it. But when you spend literally all your time outdoors going, this is pretty unlivable, you suddenly start to take it a bit more personally. But for the tree planting, absolutely. I think if you're kind of helping plant trees in your local area, you might be meeting the farmer, that owns the field that you've never really had a chance to talk to, and you might get on great. And there's loads of these amazing stories about like, recently everything's so completely messed up with people being able to get agricultural workers in because of Brexit and everything else, that they've just got entire crops rotting in the field. But then like the local community turns up and helps pick all of their fruit and vegetable and get it to market. And then they're not bankrupt now. And I think we need to kind of get back to that instead of this massive disconnect between kind of the people that live in the town and the people that run the farms next to it. I think more positive interactions between those people is incredibly good, and helping them create a woodland is a pretty good start. And we have seen people make friends, and they come back and visit their trees on land they're not normally allowed on, and that's some of the early steps to getting a permissive path put in and things like that. So
you're helping to build communities, aren't you? Which is really nice.
Yeah, that's the goal, and that's part of why we like to work with local volunteers instead of necessarily always using paid planters. It's a difficult balance because we want to, pay people for doing a job, and we want to make sure that tree planters are consistently in work. But we also want to bring in the local community. So we like to kind of mix it up a little bit and get the best of both, really.
Wonderful. And what's the future for Protect Earth?
More land. We've got a few more fingers in pies around the country trying to get more land. We've got one trustee up in Scotland, and he really wants to get going up there, working with farmers up there. But it's tricky because they're already doing so well. We almost don't really need to stick our nose in. But we have got a few people that want a bit of help. So yeah, Scotland. I really want to get Spain and Portugal going. I'd love to be doing de-desertification. It's hard to say. It's even harder to do. But those things are the future. And honestly, more we're trying to pick up a bit more contract work as well. So there's loads of councils all over the place that are like, this entire ancient woodland on council land is full of rhododendrons, or like half of Dartmoor, just completely covered in this rubbish. And we'd love to get rid of it, but we don't really know what we're doing. And a couple of councils are like, okay, you guys just go do what you want. Here's some money, get on with it. So if we do a little bit more of that sort of contract work, we can hire a few more kind of active people, a few more workers, and use that profit to do more pro bono work for smallholders who don't have the money to do any of that. So just trying to become a bigger force for good in a few different ways.
Cool. Exciting.
We have kind of like a question we always ask at the end of every episode. So where do you see the world in 10 years?
It's difficult. I can see like multiple futures.
Well, everybody tends to say, here's where I'd like it to be, and here's where I think it will be.
Some of them suck. I don't want to depress everyone right at the end of the podcast, but also it'll be 2033, and we'll have finally recognized the urgency of this whole thing, and hopefully finally we've probably got through 1.5, but we've managed to hold at 1.6 or something like that, and we're done. There's no more fossil fuels being built. We're rapidly scaling that down. Everyone's wartime effort sticking solar panels on all their roofs and sticking trees all over the place. It's now illegal to cut down virgin forests, punishable with life in prison, and we're massively scaling up.
Nice.
Massively scaling up timber plantations on land that used to be full of cows, so that we can have more timber to make more useful stuff. And we're massively scaling up chunks of the country for nature, with a decent amount of money for the people that own the land to make an income from that. And actively fighting against sorting out de-desertification and undesertifying it. I'd like to see just loads of jobs in planet fixing. So all of these youngsters that have got all of the climate anxiety can fix our mess but get paid for it. That's where I'm hoping we'll be by then.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
I look forward to that.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Has anyone asked you folks where you wanted to where you expected to be in 10 years?
Well, throwing it back at us, Ellie.
I don't know. I feel a bit anxious thinking about that. I feel like we'll have had a few more COPs that aren't too successful.
Yes, I chose to simply ignore that. That was really helpful for me. Yeah.
I think
I think you have to be positive, don't you? So I'm hoping we'll have eventually, I mean, the climate crisis will have progressed, won't it? We will have gone over 1.5, but let's hope the world has managed to pull together a bit more, and all those great things that you spoke about are starting to happen.
I think
10 years isn't that far away, though. I do wonder if we should ask people like 50 years or something.
Well, I think the thing everybody says on every episode we do, they always talk, like same as you did, Phil, they talk about like community and trying to bring people together over these challenges, because that can be a wonderful thing. And I think that I think when things get a bit worse, that will be the catalyst to make things a bit better. I think earlier, I think you were talking about, was it the forestry, what's it called? The Forestry Commission? Is that what it's called? Yeah. So like, I think, I might be wrong, but I think, is that the one that was set up in the First World War to get timber for the war effort?
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, that's like an example, it's a great organization, but it wasn't set up to benefit our forests. It was set up because we were trying to go to war and kill people. And I think I think things will get worse, and then I think that will be an opportunity for people to find better ways of doing what we already do, and that will make us stronger and build community.
Absolutely. I mean, there are little rays of hope. I mean, even things like the Forestry Commission. We've had a few battles with them where they were like, hey, this ancient woodland that you've got that's been completely replanted with conifers, we're trying to reverse that. And they're like, no, you have to plant more conifers in this area that's being clear cut. We're like, we don't want to. We want to plant native species. You have targets to restore more ancient woodlands. We're just saying, let us. We're not saying give us any money. We're just saying, like, don't arrest us when we do this. And they're like, no, you have to plant more conifers. We're like, what the hell? And it took like 9 months of arguing with them. And eventually they were like, okay, you can do the right thing if you want. And that comes down to inertia in the system, where like everyone was saying to us, you can't do this inherently better thing because they won't let you. They've never said yes to that before. They'll never change. And so our forestry consultant was advising us not to even try. But then we fight and fight and fight, and eventually they go, oh yeah, go on then. And we're spreading that story around to other people so that their forestry consultants know that it can be done, so that they try, and eventually it will just become like standard part of the process. It's like, if they've done it in Wales, and we want to do the same in England, where basically the only change, you used to not be able to change a restocking agreement, but now if you want to do it for a biodiversity improvement, you can. If you want to make things worse, you're not allowed to, but if you want to make it better, you can. And so if we can kind of push that enough in England, then again we'll have more improvements here. So it's all slow and annoying and bureaucratic and far more government centric than we'd like, but some of these big changes are happening in the shadows with the academics and the nerds and the and all that sort of stuff.
I think every little victory like that you have I think just starts to change the system. I mean, we've been doing what we're doing for about a decade now, and I remember when we first started speaking to businesses, and they, they were kind of old school, older people, and they weren't interested in reuse of what we're doing. And what I've noticed is more recently is all those people are retiring or dying out, and you've got the new people coming up though, and all of a sudden actually they look the same kind of age as me, they have the same kind of interests, and they say, actually, I believe in what you're saying. And I think every time you get a little victory like the one you just said, it's like starts to infiltrate the system, and what you find is eventually the people you're going up against are just the same as you, and they have the same values.
For sure. I mean, there's an element of that, just briefly, because I know we've been talking for a while now, but there's an element of that with land use as well. And I've talked to various farmers that are just like, all of the young people shoved off to the city to go and work in marketing or whatever, and they've left us doing all the farming. I'm like 70. I want to retire, but I can't. There's no one to take over. What the hell? And everyone's shouting at me about not doing the right thing with my land. But if those people in the city want to do something different, why don't they buy this farm and they can do whatever they want with it? And so we're trying to do that a little bit of like buying up, some stuff that's less of a productive farm. But it would be amazing to see more people getting back into farming. And if they want to bring some of their money in, I know we've got a cost of living crisis and most millennials can't afford a house, but there are people with a bit of money, and we will start to see that change. There are people doing things kind of the old-fashioned way who don't have the effort to learn how direct drills work or whatever. And there are people that want to see change, and there's going to be a certain amount of, well, the people with money are going to have to come back to farming, I guess, and we're all going to have to change how we produce our food, how we manage our land, how those communities interact. There's a lot of change coming, but it's slowly starting to happen. So.
I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks for joining us.
Lovely. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. We hope it was truly worth your while. For more information, visit reusebox.co.uk/worth-your-while.
And if you'd like to appear on the next series of Earth Your While, please email media@reusebox.co.uk.